This is the continuation of the main video on this channel from the past year 2024, commenting on 17 historical facts in the first edition that were not in the script of the Senna series and that are important for you to know to better understand this character who is so significant for Brazil. Not just for those who like Formula One, but then after it was published, the video was very successful. It surpassed 320,000 views, and it was really good. My inbox got flooded with so many people suggesting a second edition, and people were saying, hey, you didn't mention this, but you didn't mention that and that either. Another one. So I picked out 10 or 11 of the most important ones that you should know to complement the previous 17 that the series didn't cover. So this is part 2, but if you're just joining us now, you can watch part 1. It's not exactly a sequel. No one misses out. If you start from here anyway, I'll leave the link in the description. And that's what we're going to talk about today on Splash and Go. Let's go. First of all, it's important to establish a criterion here because I didn't take this care in the first edition. What makes something worthy of being on this list? The series has 6 chapters, and the objective, it's entertainment, a bit of information. It's not exactly a documentary. So I received several comments, some of them outraged with the production, saying things like, they didn't talk about this and that race. Guys, Ayrton Senna raced in 161 Grand Prix events in Formula One. Aside from his career, until we get there, it wouldn't be possible to make something fun, dynamic, a well-structured plot. If they talked about each race one by one, it would result in the outcomes of where it started, where it ended up, what position it qualified in, and so on. Of course, the script would need to make choices. We understand that. And I'm here with the first edition and this complementary information. And I always bring it as the main source of information. The best biography in Portuguese that I mentioned in the first video, and I'm still mentioning here, Ayrton Senna, the revealed hero of Ernesto Mendes. I'm not making a single cent to promote this book, nor would I need to. The book is really good, which is very good. We recommend it. If you want to understand Ayrton Senna more deeply and what his time in Formula One meant, I definitely recommend that you read the book. So, without further ado, I just have one more message. As in the first edition, it's important to emphasize that no one here is a hater of Ayrton Senna. We treat drivers for who they are. The geniuses like Ayrton Senna and those who aren't as good out there, like several other drivers, and drivers are drivers. And the first item on this new list is Ayrton Senna had a manager, Armando Botelho, who isn't even mentioned in the series. Armando was a partner of Milton da Silva, Ayrton Senna's father, in various ventures in Brazil. Besides being obviously a man of trust for the family, cattle rancher, his relationship with Milton had several common ventures. When things started to get more serious in Europe, it was Armando who handled things along with Ayrton. The story of Armando having with the management of Banco Nacional a sponsorship deal written on a piece of paper this small is famous. And he would call year after year to his contact inside and say, okay, what's on the little piece of paper? And the other side would say, okay. And it would go on. The agreement on the little piece of paper, as I mentioned, Armando isn't even mentioned throughout the 6 chapters. And he would lose his life due to a cancer that he hid from Senna, shielding him from this interference. And the Brazilian only found out about the illness when Armando had already passed away. There was another manager in Senna's career later on. Then there's a professional and international manager, Julian Jacobs, who would later take care of, who takes care of Sergio Perez's career these days. Jacobs, who managed Prost's career and then managed Senna's career, is also not mentioned. Since we mentioned Banco Nacional, a sponsor that stayed with Senna until the end of his life, it's worth noting that a great marketing move by Ayrton Senna ended up coming about in the midst of a facial paralysis. One day, Senna realized that he had no movement on one side of his face. I'm not a doctor, so I opened a website from USP talking about the causes of facial paralysis. The paralysis can have metabolic causes, such as diabetes, preeclampsia, eclampsia, stroke, infections like otitis, middle ear infections, and it goes on with various causes, including mentioning viral origins. Ernesto Rodriguez's book doesn't go very deep into the cause, mainly because it's not very relevant to us. But the fact is that one day, Senna realized that one side, I think this side, wasn't responding to commands. He consulted several doctors. He must have undergone various treatments, and facial paralysis can sometimes regress, be 100% recovered, but sometimes it doesn't. And then one fine day, Senna had an event, actually a beautiful night, in Rio de Janeiro at the headquarters of the bank. And he was dealing with that issue on his face, and wanting to cover it up, he put a cap on his head, what the bank's board thought was great. But it wasn't a marketing move. And yes, it was an embarrassing situation that he wanted to hide. It ended up becoming a habit, and the cap usually serves to protect from the sun. It ended up becoming a trademark of the Brazilian, who would go up and down, even at night and in closed places, with the cap. So it was a good idea that ended up working. I don't know if you noticed, but Reginaldo Leme appears in the series not just once, and he's not credited. That's right. Several people from the press appear in the series. Keith Sutton himself, the photographer we interviewed here, Galvão Bueno, and so on. Even a fictional journalist, Laura Harrington. It's created to condense the role of the press with Ayrton Senna. I've already talked about this in the first edition. Well, Reginaldo appears several times, but he doesn't get the credit. Reginaldo Leme, reporter, journalist, etc. I'm not sure what decision led to that, but the fact is that Reginaldo played an important role at the beginning of Senna's career, besides not being credited. And it's true that I wouldn't have expected this part, which I'm about to share, to be included in the script. Reginald, he had issues with Ayrton Senna, distancing himself from him in the years 89, 90, and 91, and then rekindling their friendship later on. I wouldn't have expected this to be included in the script, but just to complement it, a complex character, like any human being, is worth mentioning and is an important part of Senna's journey. In the second episode, we have a sequence of scenes at a gala ball. So, as the context indicates, we are on Saturday, the eve of the legendary race under a downpour in the Principality of Monaco. In '84, Senna ends up meeting someone from royalty and sleeping with her. Well, here we have two historical inaccuracies. One, the gala ball in Monaco takes place on Sunday night after the Grand Prix. Not that parties don't happen, the right and wrong, in the Principality over the weekend for Formula One, but that one with everyone black tie attending, the president of the FIA and royalty, is actually hosted by the royal family, so it takes place on Sunday night, and it's held in honor of the winner. This is the first that historical inaccuracy. And the second, let me grab it here. A part of the book to mention is that Senna didn't have the habit of partying on the eve of Grand Prix races. Not even. It's the biography of Ayrton Senna that says this. Page 53, quote, "On the eve of Formula Ford races, it was always like this. Ayrton would even sleep in a separate bed so he wouldn't touch Williams, his then wife, and give libido a chance to jeopardize his preparation ritual. He would also do part of the ritual, taking off his wedding ring and hanging it on a gold chain around his neck, so it wouldn't interfere with the sensitivity of his hands on the steering wheel." The editor has already put the note that no one is a hater of Tom Senna, or if anyone is a hater, deal with Ernesto Rodriguez. Ayrton Senna wasn't the pioneer of physical preparation in Formula One. Several drivers from before, and even Frank Williams, the team owner, who would actually be his last employer, were famous for racing and taking care of their bodies. But certainly, Ayrton Senna became known for taking this to another level. And the one who played a key role in this was the physical trainer Nuno Cobra. Graduated and post-graduated from the Physical Education College at the University of São Paulo, Nuno, he was the one who took care of Senna's physical preparation back in the beginning. And this preparation really started after he arrived in Formula One. The story is famous about when Ayrton Senna raced in the South African Grand Prix in 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙧, '84, bringing Toleman to points for the first time, that he couldn't get out of the car. He was helped by Reginaldo, Leme, and Galvão to get out of the cockpit. Nuno would also take care of the physical preparation of other drivers. In the history of Formula One, Christian Fittipaldi, Rubens Barrichello, Mika Hakkinen, and tennis players like Cássio Mota, Jaime Onsins, and obviously countless athletes who wouldn't fit here. Here we might understand the dark side of the script for going unnoticed, since in 2017 a sexual scandal broke out involving Nuno Cobra and women. Several of them reported abuses, but in any case there is no mention of the physical trainer of the three-time Brazilian champion. When he moved to England, already in his second stint, when he went back there as a divorced man, Ayrton Senna shared a house in Reading, England, with another driver, Maurizio Bugiomini. Born in Joinville, Bugiomini followed the same steps to reach Formula One, a few years behind Ayrton Senna, like a schoolmate a few years younger. In this case, he is 3 years younger than Ayrton Senna, born in 1963. He embarks for Europe in 1982. He wins Formula One, the English Formula 1600. In 83, he is the runner-up in Formula 4 2000. In 84, he is the champion of that category in the European Series. And in 85, he wins the English Formula 3 and also the Macau Grand Prix, considered the main festival of this category. For your reference, Senna was the champion of the same Formula 3 in 83. So 2 years later, Mauricio came. The two shared that house until around 1987. When Senna moved to the Principality of Monaco, he was already racing for the Yellow Lotus. So Senna lived with Mauricio a good 3 or 4 years. And in fact, Senna suggested to Lotus that Mauricio be tested for the 86 season. He would arrive in Formula One in 1988, would have good results, including with the podium in Brazil in 89 and racing through the seasons of 88, 89, 90, 91, and 92, then going to race in Indy where he also won a race. There is absolutely no mention of Guilherme whatsoever in the entire series at all in any episode. Still in the base in 1982, Ayrton Senna won a race practically without brakes. The incident took place in Snetterton, England. Through Formula 4 2000, a step before Formula 3, which Senna raced in 83. At the start of the race, cars in front hit a metal shard that got into the braking system, rendering the setup useless. From the front, Senna then raced the entire event only with the rear brakes. He won, and when he got to the pits, the engineers didn't understand the driving style of the Brazilian in that race. He said, "I had no brakes in the front," to which the mechanics, obviously doubting, said it's not possible. They went there, touched the discs, and they were cold. It's a great achievement by the Brazilian in motorsport, which ended up not being mentioned during his time in the lower categories. Jean-Marie Balestre, the director of the then National Federation of Sports Automobiles, FISA, an arm of FISA. Today, everything is one thing. He appears in the series in the first chapter, if I'm not mistaken already, as an established villain, chasing the poor Brazilian wherever he was. This happens in the Karting World Championship final, which is portrayed when a sudden change in the rules ends up hurting the Brazilian, who is left without the title. Well, yes, it's true that a change in the rules kept Senna away from the desired Kart World Championship, and that was, until the end of his life, a frustration for him. He wanted to have won, but I'll talk about that later. Jean-Marie Balestre wasn't at that final, and it wouldn't be expected for the president of the National Federation of Motorsports to be there. Not in every Formula One race, back then or even today. The president of the FIA is going, who would say about a Kart World Championship full of kids? But in the series, he already appears as a villain, and he shows up there making a quick decision and changing the rules at the last minute. So that's not exactly what happened. Yes, the rule that year was changed, but it had been modified since the beginning of the year. Everyone already knew, or almost everyone, because Ayrton Senna's own rival, who would end up taking the title that day, didn't know what had happened. And the one telling this is Wagner Gonzalez, the friendly guy with a mustache who worked with Ayrton Senna as a press advisor at that time. And he was there that day, and he shared it in a podcast. I'm going to ask the editor to put the clip here for you. He passes on the last curve, Andres Lacon. The guy passes by, and then he thinks he's going to be the champion. Isn't that right? And Balestre shows up there, already pulling a Yuriko Mika move there at the card. But did that happen? I don't have any memory of that. I don't remember that. I went to look into the results. Ayrton finishes in 4th. I did some research, but I'm not sure if those are exactly the positions. Ayrton finishes in 4th. The Dutchman finishes in 8th. However, in the 3 races of the World Championship, each one had managed a 1st and a 2nd place. And the tiebreaker, in all the other editions of the World Championship, it was the best result in the final. And in this specific edition, the best result is to be discarded. The worst result is discarded. So they each ended up with a 1st and a 2nd, and they pulled the best result in the semifinal. So the Dutchman stayed, It's not that they changed the rules for the World Championship. They changed it for that World Championship. Then it went back to normal. It's just that people were used to the old rule. I read an article from a Portuguese newspaper, which has a photo and a picture of the Dutchman saying, "It's him on the track. I signaled to him. Yeah, you were the world champion, like congratulating you." Not even the Dutchman thought he was the champion. That kind of happened, but he didn't even win that race. And it's not that the World Championship rule was changed. It was changed before the World Championship. It was an adaptation. Messed up. And he mentioned in that podcast that the opponent himself congratulated Senna right there on the track. Wow, you won. And in the end, the one who had won was him. So less of that nonsense at the last minute, changing the rule just so Senna wouldn't get the title. Much less for a villain who had already been gold-plated from the start. But yes, the criteria ended up being something kind of unrelated. Just in the style of these federations, CBF, FIA, and so on, because the two were tied in a series of criteria. And then for some reason, they pulled it out of a hat. But since the beginning of the year, the champion would be whoever had the best result in the semifinal. What can you do? Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. It's obvious they had a rough relationship, especially in the years 1989 and 1990. The first year, still under the same roof at McLaren, and the second with the Frenchman already racing for Ferrari. So there are no written reports or interviews indicating that the two actually came to blows, pushing each other around as it's portrayed in the series. Yes, they stopped talking to each other. And yes, the atmosphere at McLaren became practically unbearable, leaving it up to Ron Dennis to manage that. But no, I've never seen any reports, neither in the book nor in interviews with those involved. Not just the two of them saying that they actually pushed each other around inside the team's pit. A lot of people commented on the almost non-appearance of Adriani and Galisteu. It has about 1 minute and 20 seconds of screen time throughout the series, and Nelson Piquet ends up having even less than that. So besides the historical inaccuracy that Senna didn't meet Adriani Galisteu at a party, it was actually at the Shelby event, where it was Ayrton who went after Adriani, asking for her contact and asking a friend to invite her to an event. I think it was a barbecue later. And that's actually in the biography. There's also a point that might have made public opinion even more outraged. In the original script, this is information I'm sharing with you from behind the scenes. We wouldn't have Adriani. We wouldn't have Nelson Piquet. But we do. Why? Because someone with power stood their ground and said, "Come on, that's too much, right?" And so they gave the two of them the bare minimum, the essentials, to ensure there was a historical record. In the last episode, close to the end, close to losing his life, Ayrton Senna has one last conversation with Professor Sid Watkins inside a motorhome. Sid Watkins is the guardian angel of Formula One. In fact, I already made a video discussing many of the medical procedures and rescue protocols in the category that were implemented by the English neurosurgeon. But there's an exaggeration there. By 1994, Senna had long since stopped using bandages on his hands. You can look at the photos, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, and 93. And on the day of the accident, 94, Senna no longer used that bunch of tape. This was very common in the beginning, and he wasn't the only one. Because of the heavy steering wheel and the thousands of gear shifts with a lever gearbox, which would leave their hands raw. I'm not the one saying this. I'm going to put several photos here for you. In 87 still, with the yellow Lotus, it's rare to see images of him with bandages on his hands, which brings us to the next part. Prost, Sid Watkins didn't do those bandages on Senna's hand, which weren't bleeding the day before the accident. They wouldn't even let a Formula One driver come in, spilling blood in a cockpit. Like a soccer player, when they're bleeding, they're taken off the field until they get a bandage. I want to comment that it seemed to me like an attempt, somewhat exaggerated, to Christianize someone who was close to dying on the cross. Anyway, exaggeration is a lot of television drama. So, did I forget anything else? Comment, obviously, down below. I don't think we'll do a part 3 because, right, as I said, it's not, they talked about the Portuguese Grand Prix of 92, where he did the fastest lap, etc. and stuff. I don't even know if that happened. I'm just guessing here off the top of my head. Whether the series is bad or good, I'm not a film critic. In fact, I Think if someone lands on this planet in a flying saucer right now and needs to know who Ayrton Senna was, the series tells the story well. Or for eternity, and today as well, for those who were born after him and want to know what it's all about. The series does a good job. It wouldn't fit into 6 episodes, something more. However, yes, I think they gave a lot of time to 𝘾𝙤𝙥 and very little to Galisteu and Nelson Piquet. They forced some stories. There wasn't that argument with Frank Williams, at least no one has ever reported that it happened. Beautiful biography, etc. Hours before the race, like I don't want to race, and Frank saying, go ahead, yes, the team is mine, and that's it. Anyway, it wouldn't be perfect, but it's a great production, and like any great production, it has its strengths and weaknesses. So that was another episode of Splash and Go. I hope you all enjoyed it. Leave a like, it's free, don't click anything. You know, you want to see the channel too much. Breaks for me, breaks for us too in 2025. Don't forget to leave your hype with us too. This YouTube tool shows the algorithm that you like the video, that you like the channel, that you like our work. We have social media, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and TikTok where we have content all the time. And so you don't miss out on anything. Follow us there too. Link down below in the description. Last but not least, we have our Telegram and WhatsApp channels. Where do you join? And you start receiving an automatic message as soon as each piece of content is published. All right. So that's it. Thanks and take care.